This episode of the podcast is brought to you by New Bloom Labs.
New Bloom Labs continues to position itself at the cutting edge of cannabis science. In fact, they just announced the expansion of their standard potency panel that now reports 16 different cannabinoids. The new additions include CBD, VA, and both isomers of Delta-10 THC. These now come standard on every potency analysis that New Bloom Labs reports. Innovative cannabis producers who are creating products with multiple cannabinoids need the best, most comprehensive potency analysis there is. That's why you need to talk with the team at New Bloom Labs. They're leading the industry with potency testing of Delta-8, Delta-9, 2 isomers of Delta-10, and a dozen other major and minor cannabinoids that are shaping the industry. Give them a call today at 844-TEST-CBD or visit their website at newbloomlabs.com. Superior science, rapid results, New Bloom Labs. Hello, my fellow people of the plant. Kevin Carrillo here, and welcome to another episode of the Cannabinoid Connect podcast. My guest today is Jim Higdon, co-founder and chief communications officer at Cornbread Hemp. Jim Higdon, what's up, man?
Hey, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Hey, thank you for making time for me today. I'm excited to talk to you and learn more about your company, Cornbread Hemp. I love the name.
Thanks. I appreciate it. We're from Kentucky, and we got a long history of cannabis and hemp in Kentucky, and cornbread is part of it. And Cornbread Hemp is carrying on a long tradition here.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Yes, we're going to dive into all things cornbread hemp and the great products that y'all produce. But first, you brought up a really interesting point, Jim, and that is the history of cannabis in Kentucky, right? I mean, from the outside kind of looking in, people immediately think of states like California, who's been operating in the last, 20 years or so, and Colorado, who came online, and some of these others. But you talk about Kentucky's history with hemp farming, and tell me why, like the history of it, and why Kentucky maybe in their farming practices may be superior than others.
It's a great question. It's a great sort of person to talk about this, like really nerdy outdoor cannabis stuff. Why Kentucky is so special for outdoor cannabis growing. It's a great story. So just a bit about me and my background for folks who don't know me. I got started in cannabis as a journalist and a book author. I wrote a book called The Cornbread Mafia. I come from my hometown in central Kentucky. A place called Lebanon, Kentucky, was the headquarters, the unlikely headquarters of the largest domestic marijuana syndicate in American history, where in the late 80s, between 85, 89, 70 guys arrested on 30 farms in 10 states with 200 tons of marijuana.
Whoa.
And of these 70 who get caught, none of them talk. And so prosecutors think they're going to run this big RICO case against all these guys, but they have 70 guys arrested, but no witnesses because no one's talking. So this really frustrated the feds. So in the summer of 89, they held a press conference where they laid out their whole prosecution against these guys, giving no one a chance to defend themselves. And in the course of this press conference, referred to them as the Cornbread Mafia. And that name stuck. And I'm in middle school at the time, and it was this really traumatic thing that happened to our community when the news vans descended on our town talking about this thing called the Cornbread Mafia that no one around town knew anything about. This is something that just was sort of created in this press conference. So I went off to school to be a writer and wanted to have a good story to write about. And this story was just sitting out there untold because no one would talk about it. And I came home and put in the work and did a bunch of open records requests with FBI and DEA and state police, and got this long history of this lengthy years-long prosecution against these guys, and was able to contextualize into the social history of this part of Kentucky that has this long tradition of hemp growing, in addition to moonshining, bootlegging, bourbon making, and all these things are of a piece and tie together in these families, in this culture, in these communities. And so first I write this book, and the book is a success. It leads me into journalism in the cannabis space. I was covering cannabis policy for Politico. I was freelancing for the Washington Post when news broke in Kentucky. So I was a working journalist on the basis of the book being a success. And while covering the Farm Bill passing in 2018, had this realization that hemp is about to be legal, cannabinoid hemp is about to be legal. Kentucky's this perfect place to grow it, but no one's doing it right. No one understands the branding and the history and how to bring all these things together. And so that was the basis for wanting to stop everything I was doing and start this company. But to answer your other question about Kentucky uniquely, what makes Kentucky so unique to cannabis? So as part of my book writing work, I do the deep dive on the history of hemp. The first documented hemp crop in Kentucky is 1775.
So the first documented hemp crop in the United States, or wait,
in Kentucky.
In Kentucky. Okay.
So certainly hemp growing in other parts of the colonies, the North American colonies before then, both on the East Coast,
right,
and also on the West Coast in California from the Spanish, or the natives may have been growing it before the Spanish, but definitely California and the East Coast are growing hemp early in the colonial period. Kentucky growing hemp before statehood, before the Revolutionary War.
So in that time period, like let's just dive a bit in there and talk about what they were growing hemp for, right? Because there's so many different applications and uses for industrial hemp. So was it mostly clothing? Was it to feed their livestock? Like what all did it entail?
So the more I understand about hemp in Kentucky as a crop and as an antebellum crop before the Civil War, hemp is being grown for twine and bagging, burlap sacks. And twine and burlap are being used as a secondary crop to support the cotton industry in the Deep South. So we're using Kentucky is exploiting enslaved Black men to make fiber out of the hemp crop that's then used to further exploit Black labor in the Deep South.
Wow. Okay.
So that's the origin, the early antebellum pre-20th century history of hemp in Kentucky is primarily a plantation crop because it was so work intensive.
Got you. Right. Okay. That makes sense. So then was there any type of progression or evolution of the use of it kind of after that time period, or kind of where did the hemp, plant fall in that range, like in years to come?
So I'm always looking for that first moment, right, where hemp becomes something more than hemp. When people are like, there's something else you can do with this, right? So the first thing that I learned that one could do with it, before we get to its psychoactive properties, in the antebellum period, when they harvested hemp, they would keep it in shocks all winter long, right? They would cut it in the fall, but leave it in the field all winter, and then red it, like remove the fiber from the herd in the spring. So all winter, these shocks of hemp are sitting out in the field. I'm told that the Underground Railroad would use hemp shocks to hide people at night because
Wow.
they could hollow them out and sneak people in them in the winter when there wasn't cover for other things. So that's one story that I've heard. And this is, of course, just anecdotal, hand-me-down stuff, but really interesting. Helps me contextualize this plant and where I'm from in a historical sense. In 1937, right, is when hemp gets outlawed. So the Courier-Journal, the local paper here, in 1938. The reason why I'm aware of the harvesting being later than when it's cut is because the Courier-Journal sends a photographer to the last hemp harvest, and it's in March of 38. So the following March, the Courier-Journal sends a photographer, and he takes pictures of white men and Black men in the field, moving the hemp into, I guess, decorticators,
Mm-hmm.
heavy machines to.
Right. The process of retting, like you said previously, where they
Right.
separate the fiber from the herd. Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And so in one of the captions in one of these photos, it says something like I don't know if it says like folk remedy It's like some people say that that hemp will cure epilepsy if you tie a string of it around your neck.
What?
What?
Yeah,
Like
what?
two things: epilepsy, and also by tying a string of hemp around your neck. So it seems like maybe they were onto something but didn't know how to execute what they thought they were onto.
That makes sense because obviously we know that like CBD and even THC helps with epilepsy, right? And but the formulation in which they're trying to consume it, I don't see how tying around their neck would do anything, right?
Well, I mean, when one works in the crop, especially in the summer,
You're sweating,
it's bound to absorb into the skin.
right?
Tobacco farmers, people who work in tobacco fields, get nicotine poison all the time for coming in contact with the tobacco leaves on their skin. Like that's kind of a common agricultural occurrence. So it could be the case that there was some anecdotal evidence as early as the 1930s that there was something about this plant that did something more than just make fiber.
Wow, that is amazing. And that was again featured in the Courier, that the newspaper that you mentioned in
Yeah,
1938.
I've got this photo essay that I've not really done much with, but I'm sitting on it, looking for something to do with it, looking for someone to be interested in it, and it's something what it is not, and for nerds who are interested in cannabis regulations with the FDA, there's this loophole in FDA regulations that say that FDA regulations don't apply if a product was marketed for a purpose before the FDA existed. So it's not an advertisement for hemp for a medicinal purpose. So like we're still looking for that thing. So I think
Wow.
it might still be out. Like if this was a thing in the 30s, it could be the case that something like that's out there.
That is so incredible. Hey, I mean, at a minimum, if you wanted to share the photo and some context, I would put it on our social media. I mean, or wait until you publish something and then, of course, do that. But that is awesome, man. That's really, really cool.
So
Um,
so one of the things I learned in the course of writing the book is the reason why Kentucky is such a unique and special place for growing cannabis is that it sits on the 37th parallel, which, if you trace it to the other side of the world, crosses the Hindu Kush mountain range in Asia, where indica strains originate. So it's the light cycles in Kentucky that are uniquely well suited for growing cannabis.
and those light cycles, to kind of put in layman's terms, you're saying those are almost correlate to the ones that you'd find in the Middle East region where Afghan Kush and things like that are grown and cultivated.
Right, where Kush strains originated
Wow.
in the mountain range between Pakistan and Afghanistan, uh, has the same. We're on the same latitude, so we have the same light cycle.
So yeah, so that makes, I mean, that makes sense in terms of the ideals, like kind of sunlight climate that Kentucky offers, as well as its history with growing hemp that dating back to the antebellum times. And so that's what makes your company so unique and awesome, Jim, is the fact that you're able to tell that historic kind of chronological time of events in throughout your brand and the products that y'all produce, right?
That's exactly right. That's one of the things that we work to do is to we're not just selling the best products on the market. We're also telling the best story.
So let's talk about your company then. So I know that y'all have a big focus on being USDA organic certified. So let's first start there and talk about why that's so important for hemp derived, CBD products.
Well, first of all, like who would have thought a few years ago that any cannabis product would be certified organic by the federal government? I mean, that by itself is just an amazing achievement and accomplishment in terms of the movement to legalize cannabis completely, is to get the federal government to recognize it as good. And the USDA organic seal is the first step in that process. And so that's one of the reasons why it was really important to us, but also because there's not FDA regulations yet in the CBD space. Finding a certifier, finding someone who would stamp our product with approval that would signify to consumers that it meets a certain standard in production is really important to us. And the USDA organic seal does that, and not just does it at a baseline, it does it at a very high level, right? All of our ingredients and all of our products are inspected the entire supply chain to certify that each product for its entire supply chain is free of any contaminants that aren't organic. and all of our labels are approved to make sure our labels are accurate. And no other CBD company that doesn't have a USDA organic seal has to go through any of that process.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, it's especially important, like you mentioned, without that, FDA consumer oversight and having that stamp of approval from the USDA is huge because again, you're kind of you're measured at a higher standard, right, of your products and your processes, your equipment, everything that you're doing. So, tell me, like, what has it been a challenge, like, with the lack of FDA oversight with your business? I mean, I asked this with most operators in the space. I know that it's challenging due to, the snake oil and low quality products that are emerging. So has that been a challenge for Cornbread Hemp?
One of the biggest challenges the delay in the FDA process poses for us is that it keeps like big box retail and mainstream grocery and mainstream pharmacy kind of out of the picture for ingestible CBD products. They won't come in until the FDA approves it. It's just too big of a risk for them.
And including it as a dietary supplement, right? I mean, basically
acknowledging as a dietary supplement, exactly. And so consequently, the lack of FDA regulations has kind of slowed the growth of the industry somewhat, right? It's put a lid on our growth potential that still exists and will exist. But at the moment, until the FDA issues those regulations, there's some paths to the marketplace that just aren't allowed to us. And so that's a real drag, but it's a drag for the entire industry. So the whole industry is playing in the same weather, and we're growing into it, whereas some of the bigger players have been hurt by it a lot more.
Right. Well, and then how do you think that will all shake out once we do get FDA consumer oversight and guidelines? So, like, for instance, with these, pharmacies and these, retail store, grocery stores, things like that, like the competition is going to be fierce, right? The floodgates are going to open. So, do you think that they'll only kind of choose a couple of winners, or do you think that most of these companies will have a chance?
Well, most of these companies will not have a chance. There's thousands of CBD brands before the pandemic lockdown happened. I assume that herd has been thinned a little bit, but there's still tons of CBD brands and new CBD brands, coming out. It's not like they've stopped coming.
Right.
Not all of these brands are going to make it. Now, yes, these big box retailers naturally will choose a couple of brands, or they'll do their own in-house brand or some combination of those things. But the marketplace will decide where that shelf space ends up, and,
right.
and brands can get attention outside that shelf space and wind up there too. So, how that works out when it opens remains to be seen, but it benefits a small growing company like ours to give us a chance to grow into being competitive for that space once it opens up. So in a certain sense, this delay in FDA regulations has been good for a company like ours.
Sure. Yeah. And not only that, but it's also going to be kind of how brands can differentiate themselves and kind of tell their origin story. And you guys are in prime position for that, right? I mean, the consumer wants to connect with the brand, and that's where kind of brand loyalty comes into play and whatnot, because they truly believe in the background, the origin story of the company, and what they're doing, what their cause is all about, and that brings up a really good kind of point, a little segue that we can talk about in terms of what you guys have been doing to invest your operations in communities. I don't know if that's tied to the We Funder campaign, or if those are separate, but let's talk a little bit about what y'all are doing on the sustainability and community side of things.
Well, we've been doing a lot to work to engage politically. Locally, the We Funder campaign is part of our crowdfunding campaign, so that has something to do with it because we were able to give a lot of equity to a very diverse group of investors. That was last year that was our first fundraising effort, and we raised $400,000 with 900 investors over 6 months, many of which were local and from a very diverse group of people. But in terms of how we're trying to engage politically or working to engage politically, we're just trying to give a voice to people connected with cannabis at every step of the supply chain, including use in Kentucky, and advocate on behalf of people who don't normally have a voice in this area as a brand. Kentucky now is working to legalize medical cannabis. We're still one of 15 states without a medical marijuana program here in Kentucky. So being a cannabis brand in a state without medical marijuana is a leadership position that we're really trying to lead into and help model responsible cannabis companies and show people in Kentucky what a model responsible cannabis company would look like as we work to help pass a first step medical marijuana program in Kentucky this legislative session. So, that's one way we're trying to give back to the community is to be a voice and a brand and a milepost, a signpost to this process. And then we're also engaged with the Last Prisoner Project on our website. Anybody who checks out is able to contribute to donate to the Last Prisoner Project, whose mission is to get prisoners in prison for marijuana out of jail. A number of them just got pardoned from the last administration in the last few days. And so our goal is to raise $10,000 this year to support reentry programs like the ones that are sponsored by the Last Prisoner Project. So, these are just sort of, ways that we find it necessary to work to give back to the community as a cannabis company in Kentucky.
They're super important elements, Jim. I mean, the political advocacy, of course, is huge, right? Because really, it's those policymakers getting in their ears, knocking on their doors and educating them, arming them with information, especially at a crucial time. Like you said, Kentucky's meeting for their legislative session. Texas is doing the same for the next 140 days, and we have momentum. Marijuana is a top issue, in some of these states right now. And so we got to capitalize that, and we got to be ready. So that's great. And then, as you mentioned with the Last Prisoner Project, another, important cause, I just recently had Andrew D'Angelo on. And, we talked about his involvement with Last Prisoner Project and really their mission of restorative justice. And like you mentioned, I know that there were several cannabis, people who were locked up for cannabis related offenses, nonviolent offenses. And they were pardoned recently by the Trump administration, and Corvain Cooper was one.
Right.
And hopefully we can get him on at some point. But yeah, no, those are all great causes, and it's good to hear that Cornbread Hemp is really actively involved in those causes. So let's switch gears now, Jim, and talk about whole plant extraction versus y'all's kind of method of flower only extraction.
So for folks, for CBD users, on the label of most CBD products, especially like whole plant products, it'll say aerial parts. Not to mention brands, but a number of the leading brands have aerial parts as the ingredient for their type of hemp extract. And what they mean by aerial parts is all part of the hemp plant that touches the air. So everything but the root, the stalk, the stem, the leaves, and the flowers along with it. They grind that all up, they pelletize it, and then they use those pellets for the first pass extraction. That's not what we do. We know that our customers want the flowers of the cannabis plant. We do a flower only extraction. So we shuck all the flowers off of the plant mass, and then we set all that other stuff aside. There's no leaves, no stem, no stalk. It's a flower only extraction process. That means it yields a more robust full spectrum profile, minor cannabinoids and that sort of thing, with a legal amount of Delta-9 in those natural ratios of the strain we use. And then the flavor of that extract, when it comes through the oil, it tastes like cannabis flowers. It doesn't taste like the back end of a lawnmower, like a lot of whole plant extracts can taste. So that's why we call ours whole flower instead of whole plant, because it's just the flowers.
Got you. That makes a lot of sense. And what do you guys, is there anything that you do with like the stalk and the leaves and the other kind of biomass that's left over? Is there, or?
So we are not the farmers of our hemp. We partner with a family farm who runs a multi-generational organic farm here in Kentucky. But there are uses for those products. The problem is the supply chains for for the herd and for the fiber are not as good as they should be. So we're not yet utilizing the byproducts of our plant as well as we could. Also, those leaves, it's not legal in Kentucky to sell the leaves for anything raw. You can't sell, we couldn't sell baby green leaves to the farmer's market, for instance. That's not yet legal in Kentucky. Hemp flower is not legal in Kentucky. So, but there is a company in Western Kentucky that's doing really exciting work on making composite flooring with hemp hurd. I forget the name of it off the top of my head, but it's down in Murray, Kentucky. And so there is some pathways for utilizing all the aspects of the hemp crop. And this hemp flooring company in Kentucky is a really interesting one to watch.
Got you. Yeah, that is interesting. Wow. And point taken, regarding the supply chain and the fact that it's lacking, right, when it comes to industrial hemp, because we just don't have enough processing plants. You mentioned earlier the retting process and the decortication, where you're separating the high fiber from the herd. So until
right,
that's
like the original Levi blue jeans were made out of hemp denim, right? It would be
right.
awesome to be able to replicate and remake classic Levi 501s made from Kentucky grown hemp, which is then made into denim, which we can create a whole supply chain for blue jeans. But the reality is the looms that are required to turn hemp fiber into fabric are gone. They're all in Asia now, and to repatriate a loom like that's a $50 million investment. And so those supply chains have not yet been built out. And some of the companies that were working to do that have gone bankrupt trying.
Mm-hmm. Say they've waved a magic wand and tomorrow the infrastructure was in place in the United States. Like, do you think that Kentucky would be one state to kind of naturally gravitate to outdoor grow for industrial hemp, or would they focus more on the minor cannabinoids, or would it be a mixture of both? Like, what would you predict?
Kentucky's future is a boutique flower state. Like, we're growing flower, right? Big Midwestern farming states like Nebraska and Kansas and Iowa, they can grow some really amazing fiber crop. And then they can have some, surplus leaves that they can get some isolate out of. But Kentucky, like in a fully realized cannabis marketplace in America, Kentucky is a boutique flower state.
Got you. Going back to your history, huh? The roots.
Hey man, like, you do what's good.
Yeah. Why fix something that's not broken? Right. So touching on Kentucky cannabis, the hemp market being, with the 2018 Farm Bill nationwide, we're able to grow hemp. Like, what has been the reaction from the residents of Kentucky, especially you being a cannabis business owner, and the fact that Kentucky, like you mentioned earlier, doesn't even have a medical program yet? Like, is there still so much stigma, or is they kind of open to this, or what's the feedback?
It's a really crazy mixed bag, and you never know where it's going to come from. Like, you talk to people in rural communities, and farmers are getting into it, and a lot of farmers got burned, right? This, one of the problems with FDA regulations not coming through is a lot of farmers started growing a lot of hemp for a lot of companies, and that all went bankrupt because they were banking on something that never happened or hasn't happened yet. So in one respect, hemp got a black eye from a lot of farmers who were told that this was going to be good and put a lot of effort into it and got stung. And so that's a shame and needs to work itself out. And that's part of the reason we need to accelerate opening up this marketplace, is to give farmers a chance to get a foothold in it. But there's not you don't hear a lot of like bad talk about it. And the worst thing you hear is that people were upset because they can smell it.
And they think that they're smelling like, quote unquote, like marijuana, right? But they don't understand that this is a hemp derived crop that has 0.3 or less THC in it. Like, that's probably a whole conversation.
It's really hard for people to get their head around that the smell is not illegal. It's not the smell that's illegal, and that THC doesn't have a smell. Right. Like, it's a lot to ask some people. They don't quite get it. When they smell it, they think it's bad. They associate the smell with bad, but other than that, like people have really come around. Rural communities have really come around because farmers realize there's real potential here. And in order to maintain a multi-generational family farm, they're looking for another crop. And sun-grown hemp and sun-grown cannabis is something that Kentucky can really do.
Right, right. And what's your prediction for the Kentucky legislative session and the potential of Kentucky's medical program being implemented?
So I keep a close eye on this. My father's in the Kentucky legislature. So last year, medical cannabis passed out of the House with like 65 votes. And it was in the Senate Judiciary Committee and had the votes to get out of Senate Judiciary, but the COVID lockdown shut it down. In November, we lost a number of those yes votes. And it remains to be seen if the people who are replacing them are also yeses or if they're no's on this issue. It has to, for weird legislative budgetary reasons, it has to pass with 60 votes in an odd number year because it's raising revenue in an off budget year. And so they have to suspend the rules to get it passed. So this session, it needs 60 votes out of the House. And I don't know if those 60 votes exist. And so we'll see.
We'll see. So, and then they meet, is it every 2 years that the legislative meets again, or?
They have long sessions in the even years where they do budgets, and then short sessions in odd years where they don't do budgets. And so this is an odd year with a short session. And so next year they'll meet for a 60-day session, which is the long session. And then if it doesn't pass this year, it'll be on track to pass next year.
Got you. Okay. Well, that's not too long away if things don't pan out in this session. So hey, here's the fingers crossed for Kentucky. You know, we need y'all
Texas too. Like, you know, like you get a lot of things going on down there legislatively.
We do. Yeah. I mean, we have a very, very, very limited medical program here. So that's one thing that we're really hoping for and pushing our policymakers on is expanding that medical program. But then also on the restorative justice side, you know, reducing penalties for cannabis related crimes, expunging records. I actually had Senator Nathan Johnson on, Texas senator recently, and he talked about a lot of the bills that he's filed in regards to, like I said, restorative justice and things like that, and some of his peers and what they're doing. So it's exciting time, man, for states that you wouldn't think would even, you know, be open to talking about this issue. And you're just seeing the great momentum happening nationwide. You know, it's encouraging.
And then at the federal level, we'll see what happens this Congress. But then the next farm bill is in 22 and 23, and we can really, you know, work to get this THC cap raised in the next farm bill.
Yeah, and I mean, you're hoping for what, the 1% cap? Is that what you're, or?
I mean, you know, I think I think we should try to eliminate the cap.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, yeah, no, of course, right? If we could just kind of federally legalize it, that would be the ideal situation.
The entire prohibition of cannabis hangs by one line in the farm bill, right? It's just the THC threshold.
That's right. That's right.
Keeps it illegal, and like it's just one line. And you know, so you know, I think we try to get 100, and we take what we get. But you know, 5% is possible, 2% is possible. You know, we can make some really good CBD products, full spectrum products with 1% Delta 9. Like 1% Delta 9 is not nothing.
Absolutely. And that kind of speaks to the entourage effect, right? And the fact that full spectrum products that contain these vast minor cannabinoids instead of just isolating one cannabinoid is far much better for you, right?
Right. And that's really like, you know, at the heart of our vision for the products that we make is that we're presenting these products with their natural ratios. We're not doing isolate products or broad spectrum products. We're doing full spectrum natural ratio cannabinoid products.
Right. Well, that's great. I mean, I can't wait to go on y'all's website and check them out. And you know, let's kind of, you know, Jim, I want to give you the floor before we wrap up and just, you know, first kind of what, you know, because y'all are really advocates on the political side and whatnot, what can people do to advocate for cannabis reform in their states? And then, you know, anything else that you want to leave the audience with before we go?
Sure. So first of all, thanks for having me. This is really great. I love talking, both, products and policy, and, mixing all this together, and the history stuff is really fantastic. For the first thing, like you said, talking about state legislatures, people need to know who their state legislators are. And it's something that a lot of people just don't know. There's a website called openstates.org where you can go and enter your street address, and then it will tell you who your state senator and state legislator are. That's for people who want to be politically active who have not yet contacted their state legislators. That's a great first step. And then in terms of what we got going on at Cornbread Hemp, we made our mark last year with our USDA organic CBD oils in whole flower and distilled, which is a little more pure but still full spectrum. And now we're rolling out certified organic products in a variety of other ways. We've just released our certified organic CBD balm stick that's made with jojoba oil and shea butter and arnica and peppermint and eucalyptus, all certified organic. This is really good. It's just come in and it's flying. So that's really exciting. And then soon our entire topical line, both the lotions we make will also be reformulated as certified organic. So we'll have an entire certified organic full spectrum topical line. And then around the corner, we've got gummies, CBD gummies that are certified organic, full spectrum, and vegan, which is really exciting because it's a place that's not being covered in the market. Something that we really feel excited about.
Wow, that's really exciting. And where can people find your website and social media if they want to learn more about these products?
We're at cornbreadhemp.com, and you can find us at Cornbread Hemp on Instagram and Twitter.
Awesome. Jim, I really enjoyed talking with you about the history of Kentucky cannabis, the great, the origin story of Cornbread Hemp, and all the great things that y'all are doing in terms of the quality of your products and the advocacy on the political side, So thanks again for coming on today. Appreciate it.
Kevin, thanks so much for having me. Really appreciate it.
Yep. Anytime. And thank you all for listening. Bye.